Hi there and welcome back again. In our last two videos, we added support for snippet and markdown content blocks to our blog editor. We're going to get started on the preview mode today, and since we kind of have a long way to go, I wanted to give a preview of that preview mode here. So on our right side, you can see some read-only versions of our snippet and markdown blocks, and on the left side, we have the exact same blocks in the form of cards, and these are sortable via drag and drop, so that we can rearrange the content of our blog. So let's get started. First, I'm going to check out the branch that matches where we left off in our last video. And I'm going to open up the form component that renders what we're looking at right now. So you'll recall we have this blocks method that spins through all of the blocks, and for each one it renders either a markdown component or a snippet component depending on the block type. So this is where we'll actually conditionally render our preview component if we are in preview mode. So let's start by defining that. I'm going to import my usual trio here. And I'm just going to export a totally blank component for now. We'll import it into our form. And now we need a way to indicate that we're actually in preview mode. Now this is an application state problem, and normally with Redux we would put any application state in a reducer. But right now we're in a form that's wrapped with redux-form, and redux-form has its own reducer, and so I'm going to take the easy way out and add a pseudo field to the form, so that when the value of preview changes, my form will re-render and I can reflect that change. So we'll also need a button that will toggle us from between preview mode and edit mode. So I'm going to add that right next to the submit button with my usual pure CSS classes. We'll give it an on-click function called toggle preview, which we'll define in a second. And for the text, we'll also give it dynamic text, so that when we're in edit mode, it'll say preview, and otherwise it will say edit. So let's define those things here. So if I'm in preview mode, basically what I'm going to do, well, really what I'm going to do either way is called the onChange function of this form field. And I'll pass in the opposite of whatever the value is now. For the toggle text then, we care about our preview field again, and this time we'll return a ternary statement where if we're in preview mode right now, the button needs to say edit. Otherwise, it needs to say preview. Finally, we will need to put another one of those here so that we can check its value. If we're in preview mode, we want to just return a preview component. We don't need to pass anything in right now. Otherwise, we'll just do what we normally did. And since I have this destructuring operator here, I'm going to add blocks to it real quick, just to be concise and clean. There. So let's take a look at our browser and see what it looks like. You can see I have my preview button right now, and when I click it, it should say edit, and everything above that should go blank, just as we expected. Now, of course, we'll need our preview component to actually render something, so let's start filling that out. We're going to give it, we're going to feed the blocks into this. So that's just in an array, and we'll make sure to remember to pass it in here. And then we'll actually need to render those. So what I'm going to do is define a snippet preview component first. And I'm going to do that right here within the file where I define my other snippet component, just because I have everything imported there already. And I may do some refactoring later to make better reuse of this stuff, dry it up a little bit. But for now, there may be a little bit of repetition, and that's okay for the time being. So we'll just steal the exact same props, and we won't need to worry about the onChange handler or anything like that because it's read-only. In order to tell it that it's read-only, though, we're going to need to pass in some options. So that'll just return a simple JavaScript object, and for our mode, we have this.props.language, and for our theme, we'll still use Erlang dark, and then we will give it a read-only value of true. Now our render method is simply going to return a code mirror component. So let me copy that from down here. But we have all of our options wrapped up in that method. So we'll replace this big thing with this.options. The value is still comes from the text property, but we don't have an onChange function. So now that this has been exported, we should be able to use it in our preview. So let's import the snippet preview from snippet. And now instead of returning false, we are going to return one snippet preview for each block, since we currently only have snippet blocks on the page. So we're going to need to do a map over the blocks. And what we'll return for each block is a snippet preview, which is going to need to have a key. And so we'll call it preview blocks index. And then we're also going to want to pass in the block. Unless we did something wrong, that should be all we need. So let's give it a try. Check out our mistake. And usually it's a syntax error. And it looks like that's what it is in this case. Of course, I didn't wrap that map inside of inside anything, and I really need to. So that'll go inside its own div. And now we should be in business. There we go. So if I click my preview button now, now I'm in preview mode. So I can toggle back and forth without much problem. One thing that I want to change right away is I want to make these, I want to put a little spacing between these. And also I want the height to auto-adjust to the snippet so that it's not any bigger than it has to be. So for that I'll need to add just a couple of styles. So I will open up my style sheet here. And let's add a rule that whenever we're in a CodeMirror class inside a preview class, we will have a height of auto. And we'll also have a margin bottom of 10 pixels. And now if we go back into preview mode, looks like the spacing didn't take. Let's try saving this again. Oh, actually, I probably did not mark my components here. with a class. That would explain it. Now if I go into preview mode, things are much more nicely spaced, and you can see that this is a little bit shorter than it was. It's shrank down to the size of the text instead of its default height. Now that we have these, we're going to have to also add the Markdown block, and for that we're actually going to need to install another package called react-markdown to display it to display it as rich text instead of just the Markdown markup, so to speak. So let's do that, and we'll need not just React Markdown, but we'll also need the Json loader package. Now, we are going to need to modify our Webpack config to use the Json loader. So why don't I copy this and modify it a little bit. That should be correct, and we'll revisit that if it turns out not to be. We're going to need to exit out of our Webpack and restart it since we changed the configuration. Looks like it didn't complain about anything. So let's get started defining our Markdown preview. Once again, I'm going to go back into the Markdown file and define it in the same place just for convenience. So here I'll need to import React Markdown. And I'll export a class called Markdown Preview. And once again, all we care about is the text property, and we don't need to handle any changes. And all this needs for the render function is a simple React Markdown component with a source property, which will get the value of our text field. Now that that's there, we'll have to import it into our preview. And just as we did here in our form component, I'm going to make a component dictionary of sorts. And now we will do something very similar to what we did before, where we will resolve the component type. And instead of rendering a snippet preview, we'll render a component. And that should be it. Let's make sure it didn't complain at all. Everything looks good so far, so let's try adding some Markdown and see if the preview works correctly. Click Preview, and once again we have a problem. And last time I saw this error at the bottom, it was because not everything was saved correctly, so let's just give it another save and try it out. That didn't trigger a browser sync load. So let's try this one more time. We still have a problem, so let's investigate this quick. So let's go back to our code and look for anything that stands out. And I think I see it. I'm importing Markdown Preview from the wrong file. That would certainly explain it. So Our preview is still working with just snippets. Let's try to add some Markdown again. And let's hope that the third time is a charm. This time we have a misspelling, but we will get through this eventually. Okay, browser sync picked it up. Hopefully the very last time. And everything is looking good. Join us for our next video where we will start adding drag and drop, we'll put some cards here on the left and we'll add drag and drop to them so that we can sort our content like we saw at the beginning of the video.